They said Holloway was already dying before it vanished, not from disease, not from war, but from something quieter, like the town had been hollowed out from the inside and left behind its own skin. The letter came with no return address, just a red stamp marked urgent and a single sentence in uneven handwriting. She's walking again. I arrived before sunrise. The train didn't stop on schedule. It stopped because it had to. Tracks warped by heat, trees growing through metal. The air had the taste of rust and something sweeter, almost floral, but wrong, like perfume spilled in a morgue. No one greeted me at the station. There were no doors to knock on, no lights in the windows, just the sound of the wind carrying something that didn't belong to it. I walked the main street alone. Every house stood intact, but every window was covered from the inside, as if the town wasn't trying to keep people out, but to keep something in. At the center of town was the sheriff's office. The sign had fallen sideways, still hanging by a single nail. Inside, the dust was untouched, but a case file had been left on the desk. Not placed, left, as if dropped mid-movement. It was labeled Case 42, Do Not Reopen. Inside was a photo, black and white, blurred. A woman's face, distorted by motion. Her eyes were missing, not gouged, not scratched, just absent, like they had never been printed at all. There was also a map. Someone had circled a house at the edge of town. Underneath, in red ink, She Never Left. The house, circled in red, had no number, but I recognized it by the light. A single porch lamp glowed in the morning fog, steady, silent, unnatural. It wasn't flickering like an old bulb. It was pulsing, like it was breathing. The door opened before I could touch it. Inside, everything felt staged. The hallway was swept clean. Dust had been gathered in corners with intention, as if someone had wanted it there. The furniture was intact, no cobwebs. The house looked lived in, but no one was supposed to live here. In the kitchen, a teacup sat on the table. Steam rose from it slowly, deliberately. It hadn't been poured long ago. Someone was here, maybe still was. There were no footsteps. Just a shift in the air behind me. I turned. The hallway was empty, but the air was colder. My breath caught. I listened, and somewhere above, a sound began ticking. Not a clock, a music box. It was winding itself. I moved slowly up the stairs. The sound grew louder, each note strained like it had forgotten how to sing. At the top, a closed white door waited. Scratches lined the bottom of it, deep and uneven, like something had tried to crawl out. The box stopped the moment I reached the handle. I opened the door. The room was empty. The box sat in the center, still ticking. Its lid was shut tight. A red ribbon had been tied around it. The knot was damp and dark at the center. Behind me, a whisper brushed against my neck. She doesn't knock. I turned. There was no one there, but in the mirror on the far wall, her reflection stood behind mine, and she was smiling. The chapel stood on a hill overlooking the town, its steeple broken, its bell missing. Ivy wrapped around the building like a shroud. No path led to it anymore. The earth had swallowed the trail whole, but someone had been there. Recent footprints in the mud, too small for a man, too deep for a child. The door opened with a reluctant groan. Inside, the air felt still, but not empty. Pews sat in neat rows, untouched by time. At the altar, an open Bible had begun to rot, its pages fused together by moisture and something darker. But beneath it was something else. A leather-bound book, handwritten, faintly labeled in gold. Burial Register, 1904 to 2002. The last page had been torn out, but the second to last listed a familiar name, Maribel Crane. Buried October 4, 2002. Confirmed by Sheriff Roy Linton. Cause of death, exsanguination. She had bled to death, but there was no mention of a body. I flipped back through the pages, dozens of entries. Some had notes beside them, buried without witness, casket sealed by order, incomplete remains. Holloway had been hiding its dead long before it vanished. A rustle echoed from behind the pulpit. I approached slowly, expecting a rat, but there was no movement, just a single sheet of paper resting on the ground. It was the missing page. There was no name, just a date, 2 days from now, and a phrase written in red ink. She returns through the bell. I looked up at the empty steeple. No bell, and yet I heard it ringing. The cemetery lay behind the chapel, hidden beneath a collapsed fence and a curtain of vines. Headstones leaned in different directions like drunk men whispering secrets. Most were unreadable, weathered, some broken clean in half, but a few looked untouched, as if they'd just been placed. The first one caught my eye because of the flowers. Fresh, white lilies, barely wilted. No one had left them, not recently, not in a town like this. The headstone belonged to Maribel Crane, born 1976, died 2002. But underneath the chiseled dates, a third line had been etched by hand, rough, uneven, fresh. Died again, October 4, 2025, 2 days from now. I checked the others nearby. Some were blank, others had dates from the future. One grave simply read, soon. The ground felt soft beneath my feet, wet in a way that didn't match the dry wind. I took a step and sank slightly. Beneath me, the earth groaned. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't come from above or behind, but from inside the ground, breathing. I knelt beside Maribel's grave. Dirt had been disturbed. I brushed some aside with my glove and found something thin and smooth. A mirror shard, cracked, reflecting the sky in wrong angles. My own face stared back at me, fractured. Then her voice, not aloud but inside. You were late the first time. I stood quickly, heart pounding. The wind had picked up, but the trees didn't move. Only the graves did, shifting, inching closer. Or maybe it was me. I left the cemetery, but not alone. Something had followed, and it knew my name. They said Holloway was empty. Every file, every report, every rumor insisted it had been abandoned for over 2 decades. But they were wrong. Someone stayed behind. The grocery store had caved in, its roof sagging like wet paper. Shelves rotted where they stood, cans split from heat and time. But the cellar door was new, reinforced, locked from the inside. I knocked once, silence, twice, then a voice, gravelly, tired, too calm for a ghost. "You're not from here." The man inside was older than the town's last census. He sat in a rocking chair beneath a bare bulb, powered by something that shouldn't work. His beard was overgrown, his eyes pale but alert. He didn't ask my name. He said, "You've seen her, haven't you?" I didn't answer. He smiled, a slow, toothless thing, then pointed at the floor. "That grave you found, it's not hers. It's hers again." I asked who she was. He shook his head. "She was never born right. The ground gave her to us, not her mother, and the ground's been asking for her back ever since." He coughed hard into a stained cloth. "She doesn't age like we do. She remembers forward. Sometimes I think she dreams people into dying." I asked why he stayed. "Because I heard the dirt breathe once, and if no one's here to listen when it does it again, it might forget to stop." He handed me something wrapped in wax paper. It was a page from a journal, a child's drawing, a stick figure girl smiling next to a well. Underneath, written in red crayon, "She told me not to tell you her name." I looked up to ask who she meant, but I was alone. The school stood at the end of a street that no longer had a name. The sign had been ripped off, the road erased from all surviving maps. But the building remained, cracked, leaning slightly, yet untouched by collapse, as if it had been spared or preserved. Inside, desks were still aligned, chalk dust hovered in the light that shouldn't have existed. The blackboard held a lesson dated October 3rd, 2002, the day before Holloway went silent. No one had erased it. A red apple sat on the teacher's desk. It was not fresh, but it was not rotten either, suspended between states, like the rest of the town. I moved down the hallway, past classroom after classroom, each one frozen mid-motion, a paper plane in mid-air, a chair halfway fallen, a coat on a hook too small for anyone alive now. Then I heard them, children, laughing, not echoing, not faint, present, close. I entered the far room. Desks were full, faces turned toward me, eyes blank, not staring, remembering. And I was the one being remembered. They didn't move, but I felt their attention, a presence heavy and ancient, not made of flesh, made of memory. On the teacher's desk lay a notebook. I opened it. Each page was filled with one sentence, written over and over. "We are still in session." One of the pages had a date that hadn't arrived yet, my own name written beneath it. I backed away. The door creaked shut behind me. The children were gone. Only their laughter remained, trapped in the air like dust. And in the corner of the blackboard, someone had added a line in fresh white chalk. "You've taken her seat." The well stood at the center of town, exactly where every street seemed to converge. The stones around it were worn smooth, as if generations had passed their hands across them in silence. A rusted bucket lay overturned beside it. The rope had been cut clean. I leaned over the edge. Darkness stared back. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something older, something watching. There was a sound coming from below. Not echo, not wind. A voice trying to remember how to speak. She was born here. The words didn't enter through my ears. They arrived deeper, like memory, like guilt. I dropped a small stone. No sound, no end, only pressure rising from below, like breath before a scream. On the rim of the well, someone had carved words with something sharp. She's not inside, she's underneath. I stepped back. My shadow didn't follow. It stood at the edge, peering down, still reaching. The library was the only building with its windows unbroken, as if the town agreed not to touch it, or feared what it held. The front door was ajar. Dust hung still in the air. Rows of shelves loomed like gravestones. The books were wrong. Titles I recognized had unfamiliar endings. Covers shifted when I blinked. One book fell from a high shelf on its own. No breeze, no tremor. Its pages were blank, except one. Herr Schatten, it's your turn to read. The handwriting was my own. I searched the catalogue drawers. Most cards were missing. Those that remained had been rewritten in red ink. Each entry led to a single shelf, all burned, only ashes left. In the far corner, a chair faced the wall. A journal lay open in its seat. The final page read, "She's not hiding, she's remembering." I touched the spine. Blood seeped through the binding, and I remembered something that hadn't happened yet. The surveillance building was locked from the inside. I forced the door. Dust rose like smoke, coating every surface in grey. Most of the tapes were degraded, melted into their shells, labelled in codes I didn't recognize. But one tape had been rewound and left out, like it had been watched recently, or needed to be. I inserted it into the console, black and white footage, a hallway I'd seen before, the one outside the chapel. Timestamp, October 2, 2025, 15:47. Me, walking toward the frame. Then again, me, from the other side. Same coat, same steps, same moment. But I didn't turn to face myself. One version of me walked inside, the other hesitated, looked straight at the camera, and vanished. I replayed it 3 times. Each time, the hesitation drew longer. By the 4th replay, the second version of me never left the frame. He just stood there, staring, then raised a hand, slowly, toward the screen, toward me. I ejected the tape. The screen remained on. In the static, her silhouette emerged, a woman in a long dress, hair moving as if underwater. She raised both hands. Behind her, a room full of mirrors, each reflecting different times, different versions of the same scene. In one, the chapel burned. In another, I was already there, watching. On the desk beside me, a printout appeared. 2 shadows, identical. One labeled Arrival, the other Remained. No matter which I wasn't alone anymore. The clinic sat on the edge of the northern ridge, half swallowed by ivy and dirt. No doors, just hanging hinges. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered, though no power source remained. Cabinets lined the walls, their drawers slightly open, as if someone left in a hurry but didn't want to be rude. I opened one. Patient files, yellowed and damp. Most names had been crossed out violently in black marker. But the folder at the back had no mark at all. Maribel Crane. Date of admission, October 1st, 2002. Symptoms, memory gaps, uncontrolled speech, unnatural dreams. Diagnosis, undetermined. Next page, prescribed isolation. Patient insists she's already been here. Refers to current time as a return. Claims to have died once already. Blood temperature drops noted. Non-human vocalization observed. Below that, a phrase circled in red ink. Do not sedate. Do not record. But someone had recorded. Tucked inside the folder was a microcassette. I found an old player under the nurse's station. The battery should have been dead, but the tape rolled when I pressed play. First, silence. Then a voice. She knows when she is. You don't. I stopped the tape. The walls hummed softly. On the exam table beside me was a second file. My own name printed at the top. No date of birth, no admission record. Only one note at the bottom. Patient reports fractured memory. Presents identical to subject number 1. The lights went out, but I hadn't turned them on. The municipal hall stood intact, its windows clean, its doors unlocked. No decay touched it, though it should have collapsed like the rest, as if it belonged to something newer than the town, or older. The archives were kept in the basement, behind a locked gate. The lock fell open when I touched it. The air was warm, unnaturally so. Dust floated without falling, caught in stillness. A large register waited on the central table. Thick leather binding, hand-stitched. The front cover was blank except for a single sentence scratched into the edge. You were here before her. I opened it. The first few pages had been torn out. The earliest date was October the 3rd, 2002, one day before the town vanished. Beneath it, a list of names, many crossed out, some rewritten, some duplicated. Maribel Crane appeared 4 times. One entry marked her as a citizen, another listed her as a minor, a third had no date. The last simply read, Host. I turned the page. The final entry was not written in ink. It had been burned into the paper. Herr Schatten. Arrival, October 2nd, 2025. Status, pre-recorded. I looked around. The room was empty, but a second book sat on a shelf I hadn't noticed before, identical to the first. Same leather, same stitching. It was open already. Inside, only one line. You're late again. The Crown Hollow Hotel was the tallest structure in Holloway. 6 floors, no lights in any window, yet one room glowed faint amber behind torn curtains. The 3rd floor, 4th window from the left. I didn't count, I just knew. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant, like perfume sealed in velvet. The lobby was immaculate, no dust, no rot, just silence, perfectly preserved. The guest book on the counter had only 3 names. The first was illegible, the second read Maribel Crane, the third Schatten, H, October 2nd, 2025. I hadn't signed it. The stairs creaked, but not under my feet. Something else moved above me, slow, deliberate, waiting. I reached the 3rd floor. Every door bore a number, but they changed as I approached. Room 301 became 304, then 302, then 303 again. I stopped. The one ahead read 313. It hadn't existed a moment ago. I turned the handle. It was open. Inside, mirrors, dozens, floor to ceiling. None showed my reflection. A chair faced the far wall. A tape recorder rested on it. I pressed play. "You're staying the night. You always do." The chair was now occupied. A figure sat there, dressed like me, hands folded, face obscured by shadow. I blinked, and the room was empty, except for one message etched across the glass behind me. "You've checked in. You won't remember checking out." There was no door, no sign, just a slope of soil behind the hotel, where the earth had peeled back like skin. A narrow path led downward, between cracked stone walls and tree roots that throbbed faintly under my fingers. The deeper I walked, the quieter it became. Even my heartbeat seemed reluctant to echo. The air smelled of books and metal, of silence too old to trust. I passed through an arch of brick that hadn't been laid by hand. On the other side was a corridor that bent in on itself, not curved, folded. The walls flickered like film left in a dying projector. Shadows paced behind them, but there were no lights. I heard my own voice, not an echo, a recording, repeating something I hadn't said yet. "You're about to choose." At the end of the passage stood a doorless frame. Within it, nothing. Not dark, not light, absence. I stepped forward. Suddenly I was back in the sheriff's office. Case file 42 opened before me, but I hadn't moved. The clock on the wall ticked. I hadn't noticed it worked. It was now 2:17. The exact time everything stopped 23 years ago. The house from the first message, the one with the porch light. I didn't remember walking there. I only knew I was already standing at the door. The light was off now, the window curtains drawn, but I felt it, not just a presence inside, but a pull, like the house recognized me before I stepped through the threshold. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been. The teacup still on the table, still warm, the hallway clean, the music box ticking upstairs. But this time, it wasn't winding, it was waiting. I climbed the stairs again, each step slower than the last. My hand touched the rail, smooth, polished, almost warm. A whisper rose from the floorboards, not sound but intention. "She doesn't live here. She never did. She was made here." The door at the top opened on its own. Inside, the mirror still stood, and in its surface I saw myself, not as I was, but as I had been, before the town, before the file, before I ever wore this coat. He looked back at me with a single question in his eyes. When did you become her witness? The mirror cracked, not from pressure, but from truth. Behind it, another door, and on that door, scratched in crooked red letters, "Last room. Do not enter alone." The final door was thin, barely wood. It resisted not with strength, but with memory. My hand trembled before touching the handle, not from fear, but familiarity. I had opened this door before. It opened again. Inside, the room was small, a child's room. One bed, a cracked mirror, no windows. On the bed sat a music box, no ticking, just stillness. On the floor, old drawings, stick figures, all of them smiling, except one. The girl with the red dress. Her face was blank, always blank. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. There was no light, but I could see. The walls pulsed softly, not with breath but memory. Names flickered across them like shadows. Maribel, Linton, Crane, Schatten. My own name repeated most, sometimes whole, sometimes reversed. A whisper filled the space. No sound, just presence. She didn't bring you here. You remembered your way back. In the mirror, I saw them all. Not ghosts, not dreams, versions, echoes of choices not taken. One of them stepped forward, my face, but not my eyes. He whispered, "You arrived too early." Then I was alone again, or I had never left. The music box began to tick once more, slowly, faintly. The door was gone. The walls began to fade, and so did I.